and I'm the Managing Director of SOITEC Kenya. SOITEC stands for Solar and Wind Technology, and in Kenya we've been active here since 2015. We have a pipeline of wind and solar projects that are in early stage development and in various stages of feasibility as well. So as he mentioned, we noticed demand creation became an issue in the country and started looking at other ways we could develop energy projects in Kenya. And this led us to what George alluded to earlier, the green hydrogen economy. Not looking at electricity itself as a good, but looking how we can unlock industrial pathways that can create demand for electricity. So around 2019, we ventured into Power-to-X, or what is called green hydrogen. And since then, we've seen a bit of traction with the regulator, with the policymakers, even interest from the EU and DFIs to see how we can create this green hydrogen economy in Kenya and how it could realize other benefits for us in terms of climate change, adaptation, mitigation, how we can get access to such finance for Power-to-X projects, and also see how we can create jobs and an economy in line with the economic blueprint we have in this country.
Today we are concentrating on the electricity sector. The first thing that I'd like to say that we do, of course, and I'm happy that we have our colleagues here, is we make sure that we give you power at the best price that is economically possible. So between the regulator ourselves and the utility, KPLC, we calculate the best cost at which we can give you power, and you'll be seeing more developments as we go along. And that is the one thing that I'd like to emphasize on, that in as much as people may complain about the cost of power, it is comparable in the region. And we have a very stringent process on how we calculate these charges. And we promise you, we are giving you the best price that we can based on the assets that we're using to give you the power.
This is Reed. I run the charging infrastructure team as well as the local manufacturing team for Basigo. We have 15 more buses in the port, Bandarini Saizi, and we expect them to be up here in Nairobi by early next month, finished and ready to go, with about 5 more SACCOs in and around Nairobi. So we need to talk. I love everything you guys are saying, and we are on the demand side. We have a lot of it. If you've got extra power at night, I've got stuff to fill those extra thermal things just going out into the wind. Lete huko kwetu tunaweza kuitumia.
New service industries, like we've seen the data centers that are coming up. They really take a bit of power, and we've seen a lot of requests, Google, Liquid Telecom, wanting to set shop in both either in Nairobi or in Mombasa. And those have been driving the kind of demand that we are seeing. We've seen a bit of expansion in the industrial sector. The other day you saw the president opening up a plant in Kilifi for DEFCI. DEFCI is using our power. It's not 100% captive power. Their bill is quite high. In fact, it's one of the highest. It's one of our highest customer. And of course, we are aware that most of the large power customers are moving towards captive power, self-generation, and trying to support that. That is a good thing, because at the end of the day, they're using renewable sources, which are resources within the country, and they're helping us conserve the little resources that we have as a country. Because KPLC is not all about making money, it's also sustainably using the resources that you have in the country. So we, as a country, or as a company, also is looking at driving that demand, and that is why you've seen KPLC coming up at the forefront in terms of e-mobility. We've partnered with Basigo. We have been working very closely with our large power customers. If you look at the way even we do our connection, we are trying to move them to higher voltages from not say the 415, we are now moving them to 220, 220 kV, 132, 66, where we have less losses, less interference. It is much more stable and good for their business. So we are trying to encourage them or connect them at those levels, offering alternative supply points, so that then their quality of supply is totally assured. We know if they bring 1,000 buses tomorrow, maybe the system cannot hold.
Yep.
So we just have to be careful to spread the charging stations in a way that then the entire system can be able to hold. So that is being done.
Yep.
And in a short while, you'll see us rolling down the framework under which then we can work closely together with the association of. There's an association that you have that has all the players within the e-mobility association, so that then we agree on how we can be able to plant. And we want to have the private sector come on board to drive that. But KPLC just wants to ensure that the ecosystem is in a way that it can support. The network we have can support the various charging stations at whatever they are.
We've got 17 buses, and we're going to be buying a lot of power just for those 17 buses. By the end of next year, we're hoping to be at 100 buses. By the year after that, 500. So we may not be in Kwale or in Kilifi with Devki in a single place, but we as a company are bringing transport. And the cool thing is, you don't have to import the power. This is Kenyan-made power propelling all of these cars. So the local content that we have is actually provided by all the people in this room, rather than the guys kind of up in the drier northern areas in the Middle East.
This area is trying to unify regulation. It's trying to unify regulation for the East Africa community, so the countries can move together. We have things such as harmonization of tariff setting. We have other working streams such as electrification. I think Kenya is it 74% now in terms of electrification? Yes. So we're trying to bring the other countries along. So from a regulatory point of view, is more combining these regulatory aspects and bringing them together in terms of having a unified regulatory framework. We're doing a petroleum demand forecasting for the next 20 years. We're doing that model in Naivasha today, actually, and I kept asking. We can't see a dip in demand occasioned by the anticipated increase in use of green vehicles.
It is of up to 5 gigawatt electrolysis capacity. Of course, since we're all here in the room, we've been working in the private sector space with pilots that are planned. We are doing feasibility studies for different hydrogen derivatives, and we're actually working with the Ministry of Energy in a working group, looking at each particular industrial pathway for this hydrogen economy and how these projects will be phased, what captive use of electricity they will require, and whether it will be, to what extent this could be able to help the economy.
If you go to Ghana today, they are load shedding. If you go to South Africa, they are load shedding. South Africa has an installed capacity of 52,000. Yeah, but they are barely reaching that. I was reading through, their availability factor is way low. Those machines are old. Ghana, the same problem. Ghana, they were load shedding because their availability factor was 74% of their installed capacity. Kenya we are moving towards that direction. These machines are getting old, so we shouldn't look at the installed capacity number. So as he says, it is good to start planning, and that is why we signed contract upfront to support us in terms of new generation.
To see Wawero has put panels and is selling to the grids, and I've bought a new car and I've built a new house, and you want to do the same as me. So at the end of the day, somebody is going to end up with so many, shall we call them electricpreneurs? And then they will not and they still have to pay their original plans. So we're trying to avoid that scenario. We're not saying we don't encourage business. We're just saying that it's very important to monitor that part. So the amendments haven't gone through yet, but we're trying to reduce. We're trying to get more visibility on that area.
We run those to about 130 to 140% any given day. So a bus on average is consuming about 4,500 kilowatt hours a month. Between the 17 buses is about 75,000 kilowatt hours. We're going to be adding a few more bigger buses later in the year. So we're looking at kind of 1 million kilowatt hours just for these 19 buses that we'll be running before we bring a little bit more. We may be up to kind of 2 million by end of the year. Nominal range is 250, depending on 250 kilometers. So depending on, a lot of it is on driver behavior, the road conditions, and a little bit of the weather. But most of our buses are doing kind of 220, 230 on a given day, come back for a small top up, and then they'll do another kind of 120 on that day. So most of them are PTAing over 300 kilometers on any given day.
Comment about what your general feeling of this event has been today in terms of realizing conversations around the energy sector in the country.
I think the conversation has been good. It was well attended. The topics of discussions were very relevant, addressing some of the key issues that are coming up. Remember, the energy sector is still not a very big sector, a 3,100 megawatt capacity economy. Of course, there is need to address the issues of renewable energy, which were discussed in terms of ensuring our energy mix is up to 100% if possible. We are lucky Kenya is currently doing 92%, and there is a drive towards the new plants coming on board to ensure that we move it even closer to 100%. So I believe it has addressed some of the issues that are pertinent to the current discussions.
A question that I want to pick up from you at the sidelines of this event is that you're very keen on telling Kenyans, look, our power in the country is inexpensive. I mean, KPLC comes to the fore every time things happen around the country, around the energy sector. Could you reiterate the same sentiments? Talk to them now on the sidelines of this event.
Oh, okay. So the cost of power is an important subject to everybody because energy drives the economy. And looking around and seeing the cost of power in Kenya comparable to what we have in East Africa or the larger sub-Saharan Africa, the power is comparable. The price is comparable given the kind of sources of energy that we use to generate this power, and then our network structure and our economy in generally. So I would say the power cost is comparable. The issue that comes up every other day that electricity is expensive is it might be true or not true, but from my perspective, I believe if you compare electricity with other utilities that we are or services that we are getting, say from the mobile phone, we buy airtime every other day. As an individual, you use the airtime as an individual on your phone, and let's say you buy it at 100 shillings per day. If you buy 100 shillings unit per day, that's roughly like about 4 units. You can use the 4 units as a family, not as an individual, for the next 1 or 2 days, depending on the usage. So if on average, the cost of power compared to other services or utilities that we procure as individuals or households could be said to be cheaper. From my perspective, it is cheaper. An individual can spend 4,000 a day on airtime or per month on airtime, and barely spends 4,000 per month as a household, powering all his appliances, and yet we still say electricity is expensive.
Samson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Anytime. It has been a successful event. Talk to me about why this was important today.
This is really important because at the moment, the market is changing quite a bit. There are so many changes that are happening, and it's about time now we come and have an integrating kind of conversation. So how can we ensure that all these private players get an opportunity to access whatever markets that they see as targets while ensuring the whole still functions? And then that's where the conversation around CNI players, the ones who do the solar plants within the industries, the IPPs, the transmission people, how does the whole ecosystem work together? And it's really a conversation that is beyond any one organization in the sector. And that's why, as the Electricity Sector Association, we did make a very conscious decision to try and have a platform where the private sector can also plug into this conversation and pull in all the other actors from the public sector.
Do you feel conversations around taking monopoly of QPLC, which has been a sole player in this particular sector, is coming out with your association as part of that conversation?
Yes, and it's not just us. Honestly, it's the Energy Act. It's the law. The law actually now requires that we start thinking around how do we then allow for other people to, they call it reticulation within the Energy Act, but in principle this basically means carving out certain areas to allow for other distributors. But at the same time, we must ensure that the system still works, that KPLC can still actually make a profit, because this is a public body that we have invested in as a country. So we can't just abandon it. We must ensure that even as we make our changes, the entire sector remains sustainable, and KPLC is a core part of that.
Listening to majority of the contributions here today, it looks as if conversations on hydrogen power in the country, conversations on e-mobility in the country. Do you think as a sector we are a bit late in adopting these new forms of energy?
I think the best way to answer that is just to say that there's no other better time. It's today or yesterday. So let's just harness the moment that we are in. That KPLC, the private sector, the government, the regulator, everybody's thinking in one direction. Let's bring our energies together. And remember, we have this petroleum issue. Now, specifically looking at e-mobility, we have this petroleum issue. The prices are going high. We don't have enough dollars. We need to find a way to move our reliance on petroleum to some other kind of mobility. And e-mobility provides that chance. And the same thing with green hydrogen. We are not talking about producing hydrogen just to have hydrogen. Hydrogen itself is an input to locally made fertilizer. And fertilizer is the other problem we have in this country. And we keep importing and subsidizing fertilizer, while we could use the same amount of money to develop our own fertilizer production industry. So these conversations around green energy and green hydrogen and e-mobility are very, very crucial for us as Kenyans at the moment.
Very much. Just 15 seconds. What do you expect from the sector in 2023?
In 2023, I expect a lot more conversations, and the conversations moving towards action. So we need to start seeing, let's sit down and see how we incentivize e-mobility and actually do it, not just talk about it. Same to green hydrogen, same to enabling trading power within the region, because our country desperately needs that kind of intervention.
Thank you very much. Anytime, man. This was lovely. Okay. To kindly introduce yourself and your association as well, and tell us exactly what it is that you want to achieve in the economy in this conversation for energy.
Okay, my name is Catherine Irura, and I'm the Managing Director of Soitec Kenya Limited, and I also serve at the Electricity Sector Association of Kenya as a Secretary. And the big conversation we've had today is about demand creation. In Kenya, the narrative over the past years has been about demand creation in the sector, because our economic blueprint, the Kenya Vision 2030, is anchored around increased generation of electricity. But we can see our economy has not been growing as much as has been projected, and this now has affected the capacity of new projects being onboarded to the grid for sale of electricity to KPLC. So the big conversation here has been ways in which we can create demand for electricity. We've seen e-mobility being mentioned as a pathway. On our end, we are keen on pushing a green hydrogen economy in Kenya, because it creates potential for industrial applications that are energy intensive, that use electricity, and also prevent wastage of electricity, because one of the things you heard during the panel was how electricity is vented at night in geothermal fields. So finding innovative ways where we can generate more electricity to grow industry, create more sustainable jobs, and even in line with the economic goals you have in our country.
When you look at the overall energy sector in the country, would you say that we are a bit late in adopting this, what you like to call new sources of energy, like hydrogen and now conversation around e-mobility? Are we late, or we are still on track in terms of the adoption?
I think we are not late, and I would say because we have the right resources, we have the right energy resources, renewable electricity to power this energy transition in Kenya. Since our grid is 90% green, as you would say, all we need now is higher investment in infrastructure, better licensing conditions, and a clear regulatory framework on how this electricity can be used, from where it can be used, because the market is evolving. When my company came into the market, we were developing projects just to sell to KPLC. You've heard that many people are now generating their own energy for industrial use, for own use. So we have to we are keeping with the trends, and now we are seeing potential not only to generate electricity to sell to KPLC, but to build industries where we are importing, for example, fertilizer and fuel. If there are innovative ways you can produce them locally and substitute with imports and make them competitive and cheap while building our own economy.
It is 2023, let me say that, because now the markets are going on a break. In 15 seconds or so, what is your biggest expectation next year in as much as the energy sector in the country is concerned?
My biggest expectation is actually work that's been in progress currently. We are working on a green hydrogen strategy in Kenya. I think I talked previously about having a green hydrogen economy in Kenya that has higher consumptive use of electricity. It's work in progress with the Ministry of Energy and other policymakers, and they have invited the private sector to play a role in shaping the vision of the future and where we see this hydrogen economy going. So with that, we will see more clear regulations on wheeling of electricity, where, for example, I can generate my electricity off where my industry is. For example, I can have an industry in Kiambu and I'm able to generate the electricity in Kajiado and feed that plant. So we need frameworks like that, and better transmission infrastructure, and basically making our grid strong enough to be able to take up this increased capacity. So infrastructure expansion is one key area, and better regulatory enabling environment is another, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us. It was lovely. Thank you very much. All right. The bigger news is that you're coming into the market, and your introduction, especially this week upon the announcement that a new fleet of buses is coming into the country, is there a working relationship between you and KPLC, since they're going to be the main powerhouse for your buses?
Is there a working relationship with us? Yes, there is. They've set up a EV dedicated office, and we're working with them to get extra special help on site identification and just engineering help to spec out what we need.
So all we know is that Basigo right now is working under the proper guidance of KPLC. Is that what you're saying?
No, we're working with KPLC.
Fantastic. Let's then understand this. You're coming into the market when a big player who came in as an electric company, Nopia, right, is leaving the country. Does that act as a damper to your business, or gives you more reason to come into the market?
It gives us more reason to come in. We are addressing a completely different market. The matatu and the public transport sector is one that carries close to 3.5 million people into and out of Nairobi every single day. And there's 10,000 matatus that we can tap into, replacing them diesel with clean electric transport. So different market, serving the same Kenyan people.
You did mention that you're working with the SACCOs, matatu SACCOs in the country. Could you talk to us about that sort of a working arrangement? How does it go?
We sell directly to the SACCOs. So we've got a couple that run between Thika and CBD, and other ones that run between Kikuyu CBD, and other ones that are running around the Eastlands area. So we sell the bus directly to them, and then we lease the operations of the bus back to them on a per kilometer drive basis.
cost is going to be a bigger conversation when it comes to running these businesses. For any other person asking themselves the question, is it cheaper to run an EV bus as compared to a fossil fuel bus? What will you say to them, and what is the cost implication?
So the cost, we sell the bus to them at an equivalent cost for the diesel bus, and then we lease the operations back to them on a pay-as-you-drive, pay per kilometer rate, and that is 20 shillings per kilometer plus VAT. So it comes out to significantly cheaper. Depends on how good your bus is, new or old, and so what the actual savings are. But by our calculations, it's significantly better.
Talk to us about 2023. Are we going to see Basigo continue with this venture, or it's going to be like this in the long term as you try and see how the market is going to react?
So we've got 2 more larger buses coming in a little bit later, early next year, and then we are starting full assembly manufacturing of those larger buses by Q3. So we hope to have an additional 60 to 70 buses on the road before the end of the year, totaling about 100 buses.
Thank you very much for taking your time.
All right.
The biggest takeaway from this particular meeting has been how the national energy sector cake can be shared properly within the public sector and the private sector, and whether Kenya is up to speed with meeting the energy goals by 2030 is also a conversation that has come to the fore. For LOOKUPBusiness, SIMBA, Kiage.
Vera Beauty and Fashion College is focused on being the leading